seven churches and the seven angels of the seven churches. At that time, I mentioned some things about what the word angels meant there. Okay, mention is made of the seven stars as well in that text. Revelation 1:16 and 20. If you were to go to Revelation 2:1 and 3:1, mention is made there as well. So the question is, what is the star? What is the identity of the star? We know that John uses what we call apocalyptic language, right, with symbols and metaphors in Revelation. We are also aware that asteros, which is the Greek word for star or a star, is used metaphorically early in Revelation to refer to an angel. Now, in chapter 8, we read about and we explored another star, right? And I mentioned it in the recap. And that star is given a name, Wormwood. And that was a literal star, most likely. That's a part of the cosmic disturbance that we explored in Revelation chapter 8. All right? And let me say welcome to those persons who are back with me there on YouTube. I'm so sorry about the challenges that we were facing on YouTube. I've worked hard to be back on YouTube. Now, the context here suggests that the Astera, the star, is a person, right? A person rather than merely a thing, having been given the key to the shaft of the abyss. You don't give the key to a thing. What can a literal star do with a key, right? Can a star open the abyss as well, a literal star? No. So the star in verse 1 is most likely a person, okay? A living being. And when I say person, I don't mean a human person per se, right? Because it is not just humans who are persons, okay? Angels are persons as well as God is a person, okay? And when I say person, I don't mean human being. I want you to get that. A person is someone who has certain characteristics or attributes, okay? That a person speaks, a person is alive, has life, speaks, hears, talks, etc. So in that sense, there are personal attributes that God has, and his personhood is way above our personhood. So in that sense, he's a person, right? Angels are persons, but they're not human persons. And I want you to get this. So having established that the star in verse 1 is a person or a living being, which is perhaps better for some persons to grasp, right? We must proceed to ask about the identity of that being. And since we noted that early in Revelation, asteroi, that's the plural of asteros, refers to angels, it is possible that the reference here is to an angel. Perhaps a good angel, divine agent. My, based on what I've read in the text, is that the word for star there is perhaps a reference to an evil angel, a bad angel, and maybe even to Satan himself. The Life Application Bible presents the following perspective on the identity of the star. And the Life Application Bible presents it right there. Okay? Maybe somebody in the Zoom room can read this paragraph from the Life Application Bible. And again, for those of you who are in the Zoom room and on Facebook, I apologize for the instability of my internet connection here. But if you're in the Zoom room and you're seeing that paragraph there and you don't mind reading it, you could just read it for us and we will proceed.
All right. So we're not specifically told the identity of the star that fell from the sky. Might be Satan, fallen angel, Christ, or a good angel. Most
But
likely it
if
is
you're in the
a
Zoom room
good
and you're
angel because the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit belongs to Christ, and it was temporarily given to the other being from heaven. Whoever this may be, he operates under God's control and authority.
oh yes. Now, this is what the Life Application Bible is saying. The Bible has concluded that it's most likely a good angel, right? A good angel. Now, can we conclude that it is a good angel? Um, Maybe, we are not too sure. Maybe it was a good angel. But let's get back to two things that John tells us about the star before we can perhaps conclude what or who the star really is. The first is that it is a fallen star, right? Fallen. Notice the Bible says, I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth, had fallen from the sky to the earth. And that's what we see in the first part of Revelation 9:1. John literally writes, I saw a star out of heaven having fallen to earth. Now, that is what I have pulled from the text based on my reading of the original language. John says, I saw a star out of heaven having fallen to the earth. This suggests that the NIV's from the sky is not necessarily a good translation either. When it says, I saw a star that had fallen from the sky. Okay? Because the word for sky there is not the word for sky that we see in verse 2. It's two different words. When we read about the smoke in the sky in verse 2, that's a totally different word from the word here for sky. The word here for sky in verse 1 is the same word that we see right throughout the New Testament for heaven. Heaven. Okay? So this is crucial for you to note. Okay? So I would rather translate it uh, um, uh, fallen out of heaven. Uranus, that's the word for heaven, not sky. So I will not go with what the NIV puts there. Okay? And that is important for you to note. Now, we see the word had fallen here in the New International Version. And it is a good translation from the perfect participle, having fallen. Okay. Now, the concept here, and you see the concept there is peptokota, is a perfect active participle that refers to action that took place in the past with abiding consequences and implications. Now, the root word behind that word, pipto, literally means fall under, as under condemnation. To it refers to falling under condemnation, or it could had fallen but not falling. We do not see that the star is falling from heaven or that the star falls from heaven, but that the star had fallen from heaven. Okay. Greetings to you all there on Facebook. Blessings on you, Aunt Elma and Sister Angie. Praise the Lord. Great to have you there on Facebook. So, as I was saying, the star had fallen, and the falling there could be under condemnation. And if that is true about the star that had fallen from heaven, it could be a reference to Satan's fall from heaven, okay, which has abiding consequences for the earth. Remember that right in the book of Revelation, later on, I think it's about Revelation chapter 12, in Isaiah as well, chapter 14, we see a description of Satan who had fallen from heaven. Okay? right? So this is important for us to note that this fallen star could have been a reference to Satan himself. It could also be a reference to one of the angels that had fallen with Satan to earth. I want us to understand this. So, what the Life Application Bible has outlined is not necessarily so that it's most likely a good angel. When you look at the context, when you look at the original words that John uses, then you could conclude that it was perhaps, or it is perhaps, a reference to a fallen angel, most likely Lucifer. So Ellicott tells us here that the emblem of a fallen star, and Ellicott is a Bible commentator, wrote a commentary on the Bible. He says that the emblem of a fallen star is used elsewhere in the Bible. In Isaiah 14:12, as I told you, I mentioned Isaiah 14 a while ago, speaks of Lucifer fallen from heaven. Christ describes Satan as lightning falling from heaven. Some great power or ruler is represented then by this fallen star. He is, moreover, said to have fallen from heaven, and he's represented as having been given the key of the abyss. Does not this lead us to expect the working of some evil spirit and diabolical agency? The 11th verse confirms our expectation, right? So I will go with Ellicott, really, not with the Life Application Bible. Although at the end of that paragraph from the Life Application Bible, we see where there is some amount of doubt as to whether or not they, they think that it is a good angel. I would go with Ellicott. Okay, so let us assume, if not agree, that the Astera, the star, is a reference to Lucifer or Satan, who had fallen from heaven, not merely the sky. And I want you to get this. The NIV's rendering again of the word there, Uranus, a sky, is not a good rendering. It is normally translated heaven. So, what does John say next about this fallen star? He tells us that the star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss, according to the NIV. This makes verse 1 even more interesting, okay? That the star was given the key to the abyss. Now, what does the original language say? John tells us that the key of the pit of the abyss was given to the star. And I share the original words there for you to understand what John says. Okay? He gives the key of the pit of the abyss. So I don't like, again, the NIV rendering of the shaft of the abyss. The pit of the abyss is a better rendering. All right? And that is very significant for us to, grasp. The phrase the pit of the abyss could refer to the pit of the immeasurable deep, or the bottomless pit, or the pit of the abyss, right? To which the star was given the key. What really is this? All right. Now, let us continue our exploration. I want you to note, my friends, that in ancient times, Jews and other peoples in the Middle East, they believed that there was a bottomless chasm or pit in the earth that was the realm of the dead and the home of evil spirits. It is they believe that it's the realm of the dead, right? And the home of evil spirits. I see you're asking here on Facebook, Sister Viv, greetings to you, whether it was a literal star. No, it's not a literal star, for sure. Okay? Now, the pit of the abyss is probably referring to both as the common receptacle of the dead, that's the place where the dead would go, according to Romans 10:7, and especially as the abode of demons, right? According to Luke 8:31 and a number of other texts, most of which are in the book of Revelation. And we get this, I got this from Thayer's Greek lexicon. Now, the pit of the abyss here, or some people call it a bottomless pit, right, could be a reference to both the place where the dead would end up or the place where we have the abode of demons. Now, I want us to look at Revelation 10:7 as well as, let's see, well, Romans 10:7, I should say, as well as Luke 8:31, and let us look at Revelation 21, because we can't look at all of these verses. So Romans 10:7 and Revelation chapter 20 and verse 1. Let us explore those two verses. All right, Romans 10:7 and Revelation 20 and verse 1. And we could even look at verse 3 of Revelation chapter 20. All right, again, Romans 10:7, Revelation 20 and verse 1. Has anyone found Romans 10:7? Anyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead and read it for us.
Romans 10, verse 7. Or who shall descend into the deep, that is, to bring up Christ again from the dead?
Or who shall descend into the deep, that is, to bring up Christ again from the dead? So you notice it is translated, the same word is translated, the deep there. The deep. I mean, and when I say the same word, I'm referring to the word for the pit of the abyss. The deep, that's the place of the dead, because Paul says to bring up Christ from the dead. So you see, Paul himself believed that it's a reference to where the dead would go, the deep, the abyss. Now, let us read Revelation 21, 20. When I say 21, I mean verse 1 and verse 3. Revelation 20, verse 1 and Revelation 20, verse 3. Has anyone found any of these two texts?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, sister.
Revelation 20, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand.
Having the key of the bottomless pit, right? The bottomless pit, same concept, the pit of the abyss. What about verse 3?
And it reads us, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he should.
Well, you know that chapter 20 and will be bound for 1,000 years in the bottomless pit. All right, the same pit is being referred to here. Thank you so much. You may now mute. So we note here that the pit of the abyss is referred to as that place where the dead would go and the place where demons dwell, the forces of evil dwell. All right, very important. Now, what is critical in the text is that the star is given the key to the pit of the abyss. This star does not take the key as though he was in control, but the star, I should say, is given the key. Now, the star could not have been a thing, because a thing cannot receive a key, as it were, right? And then open the bottomless pit. It must have been a person again. So this is evidence that the star here is a person, a being, a living being, not necessarily a human person, okay, and certainly not a human person. Now, this implies that the star, most likely Satan, has to yield to God and fulfill God's purpose for himself and for mankind. even if that star does not intend to do this. He is given the key at a specific time for a specific purpose. All right? So the star is given the key to the pit of the abyss at a specific time for a specific purpose. And this is related to one of the lessons that I will be sharing with us, one of the life lessons from this text that I will be sharing with us in a little bit from now. Now, David Guzik, in his study guide for Revelation 9, mentions something that is critical regarding the interpretation of Revelation 9:1. And I want us to know that many scholars have different interpretations of Revelation 9:1 relative to who or what the star is in particular, right? And so Guzik tells us something about the interpretation of Revelation 9 and verse 1 that I brought to the fore, and I want us to explore, want us to have a look at that, because it is important, I believe, what he has outlined about interpreting Revelation 9 and verse 1. So if someone in the Zoom room could just read this paragraph for us, that would be wonderful. What does David Guzik has to say, or what does David Guzik have to say about this particular verse? Who would like to read that for us?
According to David Guzik, Revelation 9:1 is a good example of how the book of Revelation is sometimes wrongly spiritualized in its interpretation. Some commentators say that the star is the word of God, the pit is human nature, and the lesson is that if the gospel is rejected, horrors are unleashed. But this is far from the plain meaning of Revelation 9, verse 1.
Right. So Guzik is essentially saying that we need to be careful of, some of the, glorious interpretations that we have out there concerning Revelation chapter 9 and verse 1. Because many of those interpretations are essentially incorrect. All right. And so we need to be careful. Okay. What is certain is that the star is not a thing. It's not a literal star. What is certain is that the star is a being. What is disputed is whether the star is reference to a good angel or a bad angel, and if it's a bad angel, whether it's a reference to Lucifer or to one of his demonic forces. Now, when we say bad angel, or when I say bad angel, I'm referring to demons, those beings that fell from heaven, as it were, fell from grace, fell into sin and error, and fell into the arms of evil, as it were, and that's a reference to Satan and the thousands upon thousands of angels that followed him, right? So it's disputed by many scholars. What I'm saying to you is that I believe that it is a reference there to Lucifer, right? I'm not saying that what I am saying to you is certainly the truth, but based on my reading of the original and of the context, I think it's a reference to him there in the text, and that he was given the key to open the pit of the abyss. I see a question here on Facebook that is asked by Sister Vivine. Could the bottomless pit here mean endless, bottomless, endless? Well, certainly bottomless could mean having no bottom, right? And hence endless, okay? So it could be a reference to that, right? But it could also be reflective of a metaphor here as well. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Now, John tells us a third thing about the star, and here's where we see what the star does with the key. He indicates that the star, after being given the key to the pit of the abyss, proceeded to open it. okay, the star opens the pit of the abyss. He tells us when he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and the sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. Now let's explore this. Okay. If indeed the star who opened the pit of the abyss is Satan, then his intention would be to unleash the diabolical hordes of hell against humanity. That would only be Satan's intention, right? Now, after opening the pit of the abyss, we are told something happens. What happens? Smoke appears. And the smoke rose from the pit. And John tells us that it rose like smoke from a great furnace, right? We are also told that this smoke covered or darkened the sun and the sky. Okay, it covered or darkened the sun and the sky. Now, the word there for sky is not the same word as I told you earlier for sky in verse 1, or that is translated sky in verse 1 in the NIV. The word that is translated sky in the NIV in verse 1 is the word Uranus, that really means heaven. And so I would translate it heaven in verse 1 and not sky. This word air, okay, air in the original, that really means air, is translated sky in the NIV here in verse 2. And I would allow for it to be translated sky in verse 2, okay, but not in verse 1. So the sky or the air and the sun are covered by the smoke that emanates, that flows, that out or rose up from the pit of the abyss. Now, there is something interesting that I saw in the original when I was reading it in the original language. The sun and the air are treated as one reality in the original language, because John uses was darkened in the original. Although you read were darkened, in the original language, it is really was darkened, right? Based on the word that is used there. I will not go into that per se, right? But what is crucial is that although John mentioned the sun and the air, singular, was John was or intended us to being